بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي أما بعد السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم أعظم الله أجورنا وأجوركم بمسابنا بأبي عبد الله الحسين عليه الصلاة والسلام. Picking up from where we left off yesterday, we stated that shirk is the problematic area in the proclamation of the unity of God. But in reality, there is no God other than God. And of course, we don't understand the notion of God either. And we need to work into these themes and meanings and concepts more accurately and allow the heart to intuitively feel the being and the presence of God. There cannot be more than a singular reality. Everything else is illusory, but although it doesn't do us any favor for somebody like me to throw these sort of statements out there without qualifying them. So we stated that there is nothing more than one reality. The problematic area, though, is shirk. Now, how can we understand shirk? Now, we said, okay, we have to deny formal shirk or shirk, which is ceremonial within Islam. We said, well, maybe it might not qualify as shirk in the most technical sense, but nonetheless, it is distracting. But the real thing about shirk is what is taking place within us, and that is something we need to explore and understand. We have stated shirk is a problem. Our alienation from God is a problem. God is light. We have become enshrouded in layers of darkness. That is why God says He is the saintly friend of those who direct themselves to Him, purges them from darkness, brings them into the fold of light. So it's this distance from God, from light, that is the problematic area. You see, that idol is of no value. When I worship an idol, I give it value. A person doesn't worship anything. What they do is they place what they feel is an ideal state. They impress it upon a face, upon a statue, upon a stone, and then they devote themselves to that stone. In actual fact, they are devoted to their own self. We create the image of God in our image, and then we worship Allah in order to worship ourselves, and we are naive. The Allah that we worship as Muslims is not Allah, the one that Prophet Muhammad worshipped. It's not. He worshipped a God. We are worshipping what I will call ego and go out and talk about it now. We have created Islam in our image, and then we are devoted to Islam. We are actually devoted to our own selves. Our insecurity are reflected on the face of our God. And then we are worshipping our God as insecure beings. We are fearful, we are intolerant, we are angry. Our God becomes angry and intolerant and unforgiving. And then we worship that angry, intolerant God to reinforce what we ourselves are. When we become loving, the image of our God expands and becomes loving. When we become forgiving, the image of our God becomes forgiving. But that does not mean that God is not loving and forgiving. I'm talking about the sort of route we are taking. So when we look at it carefully, we will see it is us who is the point of problem here, nothing else. And that is the area that needs to be focused upon. Now you might say, well, how many people would awaken to this truth amongst the 8 billion people that are here? That's a legitimate question. My response is, are we as a collective not far more awakened than those who went before us 1,000 years ago? The popes were able to mobilize the Christian masses to go and liberate Jerusalem. When Tony Blair was taking us to war against Saddam Hussein in Iraq, over 1 million people came out into the streets to protest the decision for going to war on the basis of the rights of the Iraqis. Now, these people are not Muslims. They are not Arabs. They have transcended religion. They have transcended ethnicity and race. And they are standing up for the human rights of others who are abroad. Isn't that state far better than the one that prevailed upon us 1,000 years ago? I'll give another example as we go into this talk. When the tsunami came, fingers were pointed at the existence of God. If there was a God, He would not allow such mass destruction. 1,000 years ago, had the tsunami occurred, those of us who would have lived the ordeal, we would have been in prostration saying to God, you could have destroyed us, but you decided to spare us. The response 1,000 years ago would have been one of awe and terror within our hearts. The response today is, God, you're supposed to be merciful and caring. Where are you? Why did you allow such a feat of nature or event of nature to unfold in the first place? Can you not see how we are evolving as a collective? We are all awakening. There is no other route. We are on a unidirectional journey. Humanity as a whole will awaken. So the question, how many people will awaken to this level, is a legitimate question, but when we look at it properly, we will say yes. Certain individuals awaken more than others. But because the masses don't awaken all to the same level, does that mean that the Prophet himself should not awaken to the reality? The Prophet was an awoken soul. The Blessed Imam Ali was awake to this reality, even though those around them were not to the same level. So we will all wake up, and we are all waking up. Now the problem of shirk is the human ego. You see, and I'm going to give you a prelude here. We are the product of a divine being. He is nothing but beauty in its entirety. But the problem has become our false identities. The Quran is crying out that you are one soul. When the Prophet went to his community, he did not see butchers. He did not see murderers and killers. He saw divine lights caught up in layers of falsities. And he went to the core. And he ignited them from there. And he allowed that light to come to the fullness of itself and dispel all darkness. Today, me, in the pursuit of my religion and my paradise, I have become alienated from God, because paradise is the ultimate goal, and God has become means to paradise. Can you see this? Whereas paradise was a little carrot that was being dangled for me to find my true self and my God. Within my worship of God, I'm worshiping my own security. Can you not see that? If hell were to be extinguished today, would I be afraid? If death were to be taken away, if danger were to be dispelled, would I find time for God? No. It is only because of these threats do I turn to God. My turning to God is a false sense of turning. Whereas turning to God should be to find the truth, to find my own self. And imagine, even when we are in paradise, what have we attained? It's a good place and we all need to be there, yes? Don't get me wrong. It's better than the other place. We need to get into paradise, and we'll have this discussion again, I mean, if you have the time there. But if we are in paradise and we are still rejoicing with fruits and gardens and rivers, what does that say about us? We are as embodied in paradise as we are embodied in this place here. We want a great kingdom, don't we here? We want all power and authority. We want unending life. Well, we will get all of that in paradise and we will rejoice with it. What difference has there come upon us? Whether we are here or in paradise, we are still caught up in a mess. So the point of shirk is not the outer world, it is the inner world. We have become enwrapped in false identity. We are neither men nor women, young or old, black or white. We are none of these things. We are divine beings. The problem is we have assumed ourselves to be other than that, and that has caused alienation. Now, because of the divine spark within us, we will all claim lordship for ourselves. And as we claim lordship for ourselves, we become more and more alienated from our own truth. As we cited that verse, Nasullah ansahum anfusahum. They forgot Allah, and Allah caused them to forget their own selves. You see, the very fact, I've always felt this, that I feel offended. And then I realized that this offense in myself is that limitation. It's a cry from the soul that, look, let go of this limitation. You shouldn't feel offended. They have criticized a man. They have criticized a person with ideas, but that's not you. You're not this man or these ideas. You're something totally different. But the fact that you feel offended means that you're identifying with this. And that is the whole point, that we are alienated. Now, this identity, when it comes upon us, we want to retain it and we want to maintain it. That is then the birth of the negative sort of connotation, that gives the negative connotation to the word ego. Ego means pride, but pride means to hold on to my identity. Can you see that? I think I'm going to go through this. It's my experience that you have all shared with me, but I'm going to go through this because it makes for good listening. You know, I was so offended when people were criticizing me when they said, Maulana, your majlis was boring. You know, and now I'm saying, how did they even survive those majlises? They were downright boring. But I would get offended. People criticizing, people mocking, people swearing. After 10 years of getting criticized, I finally realized that these were gifts from God. Because at every instance, the reaction that I was giving to those criticisms was a very bitter reaction. I was getting very angry. I was actually praying against them. Now, of course, I'd ask Allah to forgive me afterwards, but initially, when you're enraged, God destroy them or, make them look stupid or whatever. And I would lose sleep over it. But after being subjected to that for 10 years, the grinding, the constant grinding, and I thank all the mullahs, the maulanas, the Gujaratis, the Urdus, the English, all of them. See how clever I am. I've put it all there. And I thank them because what that did was it revealed to me what was inside me that I could not have understood otherwise. They became the triggers to unveil what was lurking within me, and that is what we are going to talk about today. It was a beautiful way in which God had planned it. When you see yourself, you think, Subhanallah, these are all the qualities that I frown upon in others. And I have all of them in me. At the end of the journey, you actually humble yourself and you feel I have no right to judge anybody after this. Because I just have to look at myself and say, if God can take mercy on me, I hope He has. Then by priority, He will take mercy on everybody. So what happens here is we feel offended, we feel bitter. These are signs that we are in that state of alienation and in that state of shirk. Now the Quran points at this. Go and look at the verses of wajib, sajda and otherwise. You will find many of them with this theme. Now I've got a verse of wajib, sajda here. As soon as I recite it, you're all going to do sajda. So I'm not going to recite it, and I want to make a point that fiqh bars us from reciting Quran. Put that in your minds. Fiqh bars us from going to the word of God. Yeah? You're not going to get my sarcasm. In Surah Sajda, it says, indeed, obviously the fatwas you follow, I think, don't mind English translations, yeah? If I read it in Arabic, you're in trouble, but otherwise you're okay. Indeed, only those who believe in our signs, who when the name of God is mentioned, fall in prostration. and they glorify God and praise their Lord, and they are not arrogant. So loss of arrogance is making our path back to God. Arrogance stifles us. Why do we become arrogant? Why is there this pride? Pride is only there for us to retain ourselves. I am. And every one of us, every creature, every being is not immune to this arrogance and this point of shirk. Now let us look at the Quran as we go into this theme. Surah Baqarah. The verse talks about 258, about Nimrod. We think it's Nimrod. Abraham said to him, my Lord is the one who gives life and causes individuals to die. He said, I give life and I give death. Then the Pharaoh in Surah Naziyat, verse 24, Ana Rabbukumul A'la. I'm your lofty God. Now we might find this strange that I would never ever say that. But no, we are saying it. Without saying it, we are saying it. It is that problem that each and every one of us comes with. Now, if you think that is Nimrod and that is the Pharaoh, look at these verses that are talking about the proximate angels and Isa himself. Surah Anbiya, verse 25 and 29. Go and study these verses. It is being addressed to the Prophet. And we have not sent prior to you messengers, except that we have revealed unto them that there is no God but I. Thus be devoted to me. And they say that the most merciful has taken a son. Glory be to him. But these creatures are his noble servants. So who are these creatures? The likes of Isa. And Isa, if you look at the verses of the Quran, he's always aligned with proximate angels. So there's good reason to believe that Isa is a proximate angel. And of course the verse of the Quran says, وَنَفَخْنَا فِيهَا مِنْ رُوحِنَا. We breathed into her of our spirit. So Isa is a product of the spirit, and spirit is a lofty being. So Isa is being spoken of in this verse. Come with me. These creatures will not precede God in speech, and they will abide by whatever He commands. He knows what is before them and what is behind them, and they will not intercede for anyone without the permission of God. And they are fearful of their Lord. Now look at the verse, and this is addressing Isa and the proximate angels. وَمَنْ يَقُلْ مِنْهُمْ إِنِّي إِلَهٌ مِّن دُونِي. And whoever says, I am a God besides Allah, فَذَلِكَ نَجْزِيهِ جَهَنَّمْ. We will cast them into hell. كَذَلِكَ نَجْزِي الظَّالِمِينَ. And this is how we recompense those who have darkened their soul. Now can you imagine Isa, the one who speaks with God, faces the threat of claiming lordship for himself? None of us are immune from this. So if Isa can be spoken of in this term, that if he says, I am God beside Allah, we will put Isa in hell, or the proximate angels. Now doesn't that give a very different twist to our understanding of what is going on? So the real problem of shirk is that we ourselves are alienating ourselves from reunion with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by maintaining ourselves in the way that we are. Now here what has happened is that we have a false person. I did not make myself. I have been made by whatever has gone before and whatever has happened in this world. And I am totally lost to myself. What you see before you is an actor who is acting out. But he plays out his role so meticulously that he forgets who he himself is. Now when the Quran says, commit righteous deeds, this man cannot produce righteous deeds because he himself is not there. Can you see that? When this man goes out to search for God, he can't find God because he's lost to his own self. How will he find God when he is not even present to his own self? He has been caught up in role play, in an act, and he hasn't awoken to his own self. And he is always trying to retain his own self in the way that he is comfortable with himself. The whole idea was to break the self, to interrogate, to reflect, to be in a state of fluidity so that we can grow. Now, the Quran says that they turn and they rush to retrieve their good deeds. And when they get there, they find that it's a mirage. Why is it a mirage? You see, this is the way we are thinking. We are thinking, and of course there's some value to it with certain provisos, and I'll talk about it, inshallah. We feel that I've read this many prayers, I've fasted this many times, I've given this much to charity, I've spoken about the oppressed people, and these are my good deeds. But what we don't understand is that good deeds are not things collected in one place that we can go and retrieve. Good deeds in the book of God are those things that give growth to the soul. Evil deeds are not things outside us, but are those things that tarnish our souls. And that is why we have this description from the Prophet, that when the people are raised on the day of Qiyamah, they will be raised disfigured, because their souls would have interacted with the way they were behaving, and their souls will then reflect those evil deeds. And people will emerge as beautiful angelic beings. There will be no reward. You are the reward, you are the damnation. It is only you. So people in paradise will also be under this illusion, in delusional state, that paradise is the reward. They don't know there's a greater reward within paradise itself that they are not privy to, they're not opening their eyes to. Now if that is understood, then we say, how do we remove this inner shirk? Over the next day or two we are going to talk about this. Giving ourselves wholesomely to God. Giving ourselves over wholesomely to God. Doing sajda is a part towards giving ourselves to God. Have you ever understood, or have you ever thought about this, how humiliating it is to kiss the dust with your forehead? Do you know why that gesture is offered? In order to break our arrogance and ego. Because when arrogance is broken, that's when the soul has the ability to look at itself and start growing. My word will go. My word will be the final. I am the final authority. This is the biggest cry of shirk. There is no God but God. The only other God is I. There can be no partner to God. I am only the other partner. I have to relent and let Him claim His lordship. That's the only way. However, the beautiful way in which this opportunity is carved for us in this world is there for us to awaken and relieve ourselves of shirk, i.e. relieve ourselves of ourselves. So Rumi says, why is it known as Day of Qiyamah? Day is when you see things clearly. Is it because in the night, in the darkness of the night, copper and gold exchange hands without being distinguished from each other? But in the daytime, you will be able to see this is copper and this is gold. To see clearly what we are. Then Rumi gives another example. He says, don't blame Shaitan. Shaitan was only there to tease out what was inside you. Shaitan is the biggest mercy if only you could understand. Of course, I paraphrase and add to Rumi. Then he gives an example. He says, if a sheep and a dog were to mate and they have an offspring, and if you want to know the nature of that offspring, you would have to put before it herbs and bones. If it rushes to the herbs, it's a sheep. If it rushes to the bones, it's a dog. Shaitan was only there to see what is inside you if you rush towards him, it will then give you clarity as to what you are. So the life is constructed in such a beautiful way that God has engineered circumstances in which we open up to ourselves through our reactions. Now I'll give another example. And of course, we take aid of Rumi here again. That Adam was given the same trial as Iblis was. And both of them failed. Iblis suffers from arrogance, right? So he does not prostrate before Adam. Adam suffers from insecurity and fear. So he falls for the tree, which will give him ever living life and a kingdom unending. Both of them fail. Now look at the response subsequent to the reaction. You see, these reactions God wanted from both of them. So both of them could introspect. But look at the reaction of each. Iblis says, God, you knew what I was going to do and how I was going to respond. So it's your fault for putting such a test in front of me. Here, Iblis is maintaining his identity and his ego and becomes stifled to such a level that God is saying, I'll throw you in hell. He said, so be it. Give me a long enough life that I can take them all to hell with me. Now imagine this level of defiance. Adam, on the other hand, after the slip, says to Allah, I have darkened my soul. I should have been more trusting of you. Oh Allah, I have awoken to my own limitations. Now forgive me. Look at the response. The test was set for each one of them to react in the way that they were going to react. The opportunity was subsequent to the reaction. That do they awake? Do they awaken? Now this is what happens to us in our daily lives. We are constantly being tested by God. And we are constantly being prodded to give reactions. These reactions then are for us to evaluate and understand, where am I? I got so offended at what he said to me. What does that say to me about myself? That you are so feeble and you are so weak and you're so identified with this being that you've become, and you need validation from others, which I'm getting right now, alhamdulillah. And you need this validation from others to keep you going. Yeah? This is how you are. Evaluate yourself. Think about it. You are lost to yourself. You are made by praise and you're broken by criticism. This is what you've become. That's the feeble nature of your own existence. So the tests are there to awaken us. Now, this happens in the Battle of Uhud. Now, you can't blame the Muslims for this. The Prophet comes to Medina. 200 odd Meccans join him. The community of Medina rallies around him. They become Muslim, they embrace Islam. The Meccans are marching towards Medina. They receive them at the battle or at the ground of Uhud. Now, think about this carefully. These naive Muslims think to themselves, this God that Muhammad is worshipping really is powerful. Because he went to Badr, severely outnumbered, and he won them. Yeah? And look at how economically they are beginning to thrive. Look at the popularity they are getting. His God will not fail us. These were pagan sentiments of the idolaters that they were imposing on Allah of the Prophet Muhammad. Guess what? They lose. When they lose, there's a cry. Sorry, they don't lose immediately, but there's a cry. Muhammad has been killed. They run away. Some of the Meccans also went to Abu Sufyan and they said, admit us into your faith once again and spare us our lives. We are ready to worship the goddesses Lat and Uzza. Now the Prophet lived. They came back to Medina and they felt embarrassed of themselves and ashamed of themselves. They reflected that this is the level of our faith, because they felt that if they are with Allah, they would never lose any battles. But they've lost. Now Now this is a shock to their system, but they had to reflect, go within. But these verses were revealed. That Allah, Surah Al Imran, verse 179 onwards, yes? 179. Allah would not abandon the believers in the state in which you are until He distinguishes the unwholesome from the wholesome. So unwholesome from the wholesome. There is unwholesomeness there. It needs to be distinguished. You need to take account of that. And you need to remedy yourselves. And then verses 141 to 144. The Quran is saying to them, well, if you have faced devastation and loss, then they too have faced devastation and loss. And then the Quran says, تِلْكَ الْأَيَّامُ نُدَاوِلُهَا بَيْنَ النَّاسِ. We will give you victory and we will give them victory. Giving apparent victory was never the point of it all. The point of it all was to see what is inside you, what is going on in there. Success is not determined by winning a battle. And failure is not determined in the loss of a battle. Success and failure is determined by what you're becoming from within. If through losing a battle you become more refined and godly, then that is success. If you become deviated from God through your victory, then that is failure. But look at the verse. So that Allah may know the people who believe. And for Allah to purify the people who believe and to crush the disbelievers. And then the verse says, or do you assume that you will enter into paradise? And God has yet to know the people who will be steadfast amongst you. Now the Quran taunts these people because at Badr, the Prophet said, I see these people who have died. And you find these verses in Surah Baqarah. They are here hovering above us. And they are saying, look at the paradise that God has given us. If only you could join us and see what we are rejoicing in. And so the Muslim community at Badr said, if only we could have tasted that on that day. So now the Quran is taunting them. وَلَقَدْ كُنْتُمْ تَمَنَّوْنَ الْمَوْتِ مِنْ قَبْلِ. Weren't you the people who were so desirous to take the sip of death yesterday? Now I've given you death. You saw death in front of you and you ran away. So the Quran is taunting them. Now look at what the Quran says. And Muhammad is nothing but a messenger. Before him many messengers have gone. What if he were to die or were to be killed, will you turn away? And if anybody turns away, then they will not damage God in the least. So these verses are saying to the people of the Prophet that look, you need to take account of yourselves. This was a trial for you, a trial to awaken you, to show you where you are within yourselves. Now if somebody asks me, okay, how do we awaken to what we are doing right and what we are doing wrong? The Quran says, listen to the inner voice. In Surah Qiyamah, verses 14 and 15. The verse says, بَلِ الْإِنسَانُ عَلَى نَفْسِهِ بَصِيرًا وَلَوْ أَلْقَى مَعَاذِيرًا. Human being is well aware of his own self and what is happening inside himself, even though he advances excuses and justifications for what he is doing. And I've noticed that in myself, so many occasions, that you know you are wrong here. You know you are wrong. And we will justify ourselves. But the amazing thing is, and this is very deceptive, that you say the right thing, but you know you have said it for a wrong reason. People will appreciate you, but you know in there it was all wrong. The truth has worked adversely within my own soul. Through expressing the truth, I have alienated myself from God. So the Quran is saying, open up to that little voice that is in there. Let it be heard. And I know on many, many occasions, after some time, I'm not trying to say anything about myself, but I want to share my experiences. On many occasions, you overpower your opponent and whatnot. You have to go back and apologize. You have to say it was for my ego. It wasn't for God. It was a very unwholesome interaction. And you have to taste that humility and that humiliation in order to awaken you from within that I did something very, very wrong. Please forgive me. Genuinely forgive me. And then the other verse in Surah Shams, and the soul, and by the soul and the one who has balanced it, and inspired it with its right and its wrong. So the soul inside knows what is right and what is wrong. Whenever we are behaving in order to protect this false identity, the soul does give a little bit of a response that, look, this is wrong. To become mindful of that and to be listening to that. And if we listen to that, then it becomes more and more refined and we begin to break the false identity. The other way in which we can arrive at the state of fluidity and relent and let go of that false person and relieve ourselves of shirk is when we begin to detach from this world and our personalities. So you get this verse in Surah Baqarah, verse 155 to 157, and we recite it at every funeral. Indeed, we will test you with something of fear, hunger, diminishing of wealth, and diminishing of lives, and diminishing of fruits. But at this point, give good tidings to those who persevere. The people who, when faced with calamities, they say, we are Allah's and we are returning to Allah. Now analyze this verse. What does it mean? You see, when something is taken away from us, it's painful. Why is it painful? Because we associated with it so intimately. When it is taken away from us, a part of us is taken away from us. At that point, then we remind ourselves that this wasn't me in the first place. I was for Allah and I'm returning to Allah in an untarnished state by giving it all away back to Allah. Can you see that? Now this includes worries. You know, we are worried about our families, the well-being of our communities. There has to come a stage from within where we say, no, we are Allah's and we are returning to Allah, and invoke God. So this is a steady process of trying to relieve ourselves from our own selves. Now on that note, I will say that when we get offended at people when they say things, and we get offended for the right reasons, don't we? He is speaking against my religion. Do you know something? That offense is not for the sake of God. That offense is for the sake of this God, not that real God. Because the God who is the real God doesn't get offended by people criticizing his religion. He is much bigger than that. And he has created other religions as well. So when we get offended at people who come with contrary opinions, it is the false God that is getting offended. It is not an angelic being that is getting offended. So one way is this, that we begin to give away internally whatever we hold close to our hearts, whatever defines us, to take these things that mark our identity away from us and begin to free ourselves. Things that cause us pain, things that cause us joy, none of these things are us. These are false identity markers of ours. One of the verses of the Quran says, لَن تَنَالُوا الْبِرَّ حَتَّى تُنْفِقُوا مِمَّا تُحِبُّونَ. You will never attain goodness until you give of what you love most. Because when you give something that you love most, it creates that severing of attachment. Now on that note, before I finish, have you noticed this phenomena that whenever people closest to us die, we become more charitable? Most of the charities that take birth are in the memory of close ones who die, right? And the nature of the charity is also around that person and the circumstances of the person that we have lost. So if we lose somebody to cancer, we will have a cancer charity, right? If children are orphaned, we will have a charity catering for orphans. So when something dear to us is taken away from us, the soul is relieved of that restriction. and the soul begins to expand into godliness. That is the whole process that needs to take place deep within our souls. That we start giving away. I mean, it doesn't mean physically give away, but internally lose attachment. Start giving away and relieving our souls of whatever makes us us, so we become free and fluid. Now on the 7th of Muharram, Bibi Zainab, and she has taken this journey, is filled with anguish. She is so much in love with her Hussain that she can't see beyond her Hussain. So she sees the armies of Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad gathering in Karbala. So she goes to her brother and she says, do you not have any helpers who can come and help you? Now Imam Hussain asks a simple question, but whoever I get as helpers here, they can't save me from the army that is ahead of us. But she is not ready to believe this. But what about Habib ibn Madahir? He is your dear friend. Write to him. Bring him from Kufa so he can assist you. The same lady Zainab, on the night of Ashura, she says, oh Hussain, have you tested the loyalty of your companions, that they will stand by you? She is so invested in Imam Hussain that the great blessed saint Imam Hussain has become a point of restriction in her soul. Oh, and Muhammad, how dare I see you alive? Go and fight. Let not my brother taste the blade of death whilst you are still alive. When everybody is gone, she runs to the hill and pleads with Umar ibn Sa'd and the armies, is there no one from you who will save my Hussain? The same Zainab arrives at the torn body of Hussain and calmly turns to God and says, oh Lord, accept this sacrifice from us. How she gave away and freed herself. This Zainab comes to Hussain, call on to your friend Habib ibn Madahir. There is a knock at the door of Habib in the depth of the night. Who stands at the door, he asks. The messenger of Hussain. He runs to the door. He opens the door, receives the letter, kisses it, opens it, reads its content. Oh Habib, I am surrounded in Karbala. Hasten to me, for time is running out. His wife says, oh Habib, who comes at this hour? It is the messenger of Hussain. What does he ask? He asks for my help. What have you decided? But who will be there for you? She said, Habib, leave me to God. Go to Hussain and give your life for him. He said, I was only testing you. Habib, in the depth of the night, comes out to the borders of Kufa. He meets Muslim ibn Awsaja. He said, have you not heard? Hussain is surrounded by the enemy in Karbala. Muslim ibn Awsaja has bought some henna to dye his beard. He throws it, by Allah, I will color my beard with my blood in the assistance of our Hussain. It is the daytime in Karbala. Imam Hussain is preparing the standards. As he distributes the standards, he keeps one to himself. His companions are desirous that Hussain will hand over the standard to them. Hussain retains the standard. They ask, who is this one for? He says, the bearer of the standard is on his way. From afar, they see the dust being raised from the galloping of a horse. Hussain says, there he comes. As Habib approaches, he looks at Hussain. He said, even though my body has withered away, when I see you, youthfulness begins to flow within my veins once again. There is commotion in the camp of Hussain. Zainab asks Fizza, what to be the cause of this joy? She said, it is Hussain's childhood friend Habib. Bid him my salam. As the salam of Zainab comes, Habib cries out, woe for destitution. Habib fights alongside Hussain. At one point, Musib ibn Awsaja falls from his steed. Hussain comes and rushes to Musib ibn Awsaja. Habib asks Muslim, do you have any last request, even though I am to die soon after you? Muslim raises his trembling finger and points at Hussain and says, Habib, alayka bihadha shakhs ma dumta hayya. Habib, protect this man with your life for as long as there are breaths in your body. Musib ibn, the reporter says that when Habib fell and he called for Hussain, there was a state of brokenness on Hussain that I had not seen previously on that day. He rushes to the body of Habib and he says, oh Habib, Allah bless you for your sacrifice. I have lost a dear friend, but I am soon to meet you again. Rahamallah man qara al-Fatiha.